Hi everyone, new funny background time. Hey everyone, Joey here, aka Animus. Yes, I changed my name back to Animus, it's a better name. And today it's another one of these catch-up-y video things. Except, I've decided that this is gonna become my regular reviewing routine because I just can't deal with making full videos on individual albums. It's just a bit much. It's too much time pressure with release dates and stuff, so I've just decided that at the beginning of each month I'm just gonna make one of these, like, just going over everything I've wanted to talk about from the past month. So yeah, let's get into this. So first I need to talk about this new BT thing. Well, it's barely new anymore, it's the 1st of March today and it's been around since December the 13th. I've just, you know, with that whole worst and best hit songs of 2019 video that took me ages to make and all those other things, I just never found the time to do it. So this is the second part of his double album release last year. First part being his completely ambient album Between Here and You, which I wasn't that big on, to be honest. I gave it a 7 out of 10 in the video. It's probably become more like a 6.5 now. It's nothing to do with the music, because the music is actually pretty great. It just wasn't a very creative thing for him to do when he's already touched on ambient music multiple times and made a full-length ambient album before. It just wasn't really that interesting in my opinion. But then, this is the second part. Everything You're Searching For Is on the Other Side of Fear. Long title, I know. And holy shit, this might be the best thing he's made since These Hopeful Machines. Like, oh my god, I freaking loved this on first listen. I really don't know what it was, it just connected with me on some deep emotional level. Oh my god, how do I even put it into words? Like, I have enough to say about this thing to fill like a half an hour video, but I've only got like 3 minutes to talk about it. I mean, look, these are just my notes for this album, not even a script. Okay, so the music itself. It's a 16-track project, like, there's enough music to fill a whole CD, so it's nearly a double album length. The sound of this thing is just truly unique. It's like, I haven't heard anything like this from BT, or anyone else for that matter. I think, like, you could barely even call this electronic music because the electronic elements are actually outweighed by the classical elements and acoustic elements. Like, he always had that, he'd used orchestras and things, but like, the sound of the orchestra is just all over this thing. Like, some tracks even going with barely any or no electronic production at all. And it's absolutely incredible. The level of emotion he's put into these pieces is just astronomically high. And like I said, I was really kind of moved by this thing. Like, I listened to it on the way into school and then it gave me this strangely calm and blissful mood that lasted for several hours after hearing it. In terms of individual tracks, probably my favourite track on this album is Pale Antlers. Just absolutely beautiful, serene piece of music. It gives me this weird feeling of like power and motivation to go places and do things. We start off with this glowing backing of pads and strings and bird noises before this instantly memorable and absolutely beautiful piano melody comes in. It sends chills up my spine, really. It's like standing on top of a mountain and looking at the view and just seeing how beautiful the world is. Like, I have endless positive things to say about this one in particular. Other highlights include The Day That Half Started, one of many solo piano pieces on this album. But this one's my favourite because of how sort of nostalgic it feels. It sort of reminds me of stuff off the Minecraft soundtrack, and that sounds like a criticism, but it really isn't because I love that soundtrack. It's a piece in a 5/4 time signature that just feels like lying on the grass of your garden, looking up at the sky as aeroplanes go by on a sunny Sunday afternoon. It's just so serene, atmospheric, and like I said, gives me weird deep waves of nostalgia even though there's not any particular thing that I'm feeling nostalgic for. Snow Suspension is a track made up of completely just a choir and at one point a backing of orchestral strings. I mean, like, really. BT is such a creative guy and such a good example of why electronic musicians aren't all boring, like people say they are. Such a mournful piece of music, it almost sounds like a requiem or something. This choir all soaked in reverb and their long notes just ringing out and reaching such powerful emotional heights as the orchestra slowly comes in towards the end. There's also another similar choir-based track later in the album, Carpe Noctem, which is just as fantastic, really. There's the Boolean query with its sort of stuttered beats and odd glitchy effects. Has a similar feel to some of the tracks off Deadmau5's While One Is Less Than Two, but while those tracks were like really quite dark, this uses all these major chords that sound really warm and comforting. Sounds like fond memories. Also got some variety in here, like some of the weirder tracks like Orthogonal with its smooth atmospheric bass line and what's it called? HPT brackets K, whatever that's supposed to mean, with its weird harmonic washes and growling bass line that almost sounds like breathing. And by the way, even though these tracks sound like they wouldn't match the rest of the album, they do all fit in really quite nicely with the album's continuous mix and don't disrupt the album's mood in any way. And like, I've got to stop somewhere because I could just talk about all these things on end, like really, I'm really struggling to think of anything negative to say about this project at all. Maybe you could say that there's too many similar solo piano pieces, but really, I don't care at all. They're all absolutely beautiful, and you know, like, the more BT music you have to listen to, the better, really, for me. You could say that the album's a bit one note, but it just helps me to get completely immersed in its emotional atmosphere. It's an album with so much staggering beauty, like mournful moments and hopeful moments and ecstatic moments. I could barely ask for more out of a new BT project. It's not just one of my favourite albums of 2019, it's one of my favourite albums of the decade, of the century, of the millennium. Like, it's one of my favourite albums of all time, probably. So, yeah, I'm feeling a light 9 on this one. God, I just used up like half of the video. And on the other end of the spectrum, Justin Bieber has a new album called Changes. Now, I don't want to be just another person endlessly criticising him. I think his music needs at least, you know, you need to be looking for the good things in his music rather than just expecting something terrible. And I didn't hate this thing as much as some people did, but I just couldn't finish this album because I was nearly falling asleep and I was worried I'd missed my stop. I had to wake myself up with Underworld's 100 Days Off because I was just so bored by the mood of this album. He sounds bored as well. The people making it just seem to not really care about it. Now, I could see what he was going for, like a sort of chilled, laid-back R&B album, but the execution was just not there. Like, the only thing I can really praise about this album is that maybe its production sounds okay, but then again, it's like still generic hip-hop and R&B production, so not only was it boring, some points were like actively annoying to listen to, like his falsetto notes like were all over the album and those kind of annoyed me. And some embarrassing lyrics like shout outs to your mum and dad for making you. As well as the entirety of Yummy, that track is an absolute disaster. I've already got it planned for my worst hit songs of 2020 list. So I don't want to spend any more time talking about this. I'm feeling a 3 out of 10 on this one. So next up, the Avalanches have a new single. These guys. Like, Avalanches are back, yes! Well, they were already kind of back. I reviewed their remix of the Chemical Brothers track Out of Control, which I liked quite a lot, even though it wasn't amazing. But like, this is a seriously big deal. Not quite as big a deal as Wildflower, their comeback after 16 years. But Since I Left You, their debut in the year 2000, is probably my second favourite album of all time right now. I think I might have talked about it in my other video, but if you want my brief thoughts on it, it's just an absolute like kaleidoscopic voyage through all these different kinds of music that I love to death. Their style of making a collage of hundreds of different samples is something truly unique. At their best, some of their tracks can give you this feeling of just true euphoria. But the thing is, it's not really their singles that matter, it's their albums, because they all flow so well together and make these big journeys. So this new single, We Will Always Love You, which is under 3 minutes long, I didn't completely love in itself, but like, it's made me really excited for the new album because, like I said, it's not really the tracks that matter, it's their albums. So this does feel like a fragment of a whole rather than a whole experience in itself. Since I Left You had a sort of perfect balance of pure ecstatic joy and then being anchored by this quite sad emotional force. Wildflower was almost all that joyful feeling, like sort of going through a sort of psychedelic dream. And now this new single sounds like it is focusing on that sadness. I mean, like, it's the Avalanches, so it's still pretty joyful, but the lyrics of the track and the rapping from Blood Orange does sound pretty down in the dumps, even if it seems hopeful, because of course it is. But even though my expectations were kind of astronomically high for this new thing, this is really different to anything they've made before, with, like I said, Blood Orange's rapping, with a sad orchestral backing. That rhymed. Blood Orange's rapping, sad orchestral backing. Blood Orange's rapping, sad orchestral backing. Before in the chorus you're suddenly hit with all these harps and pianos and a kids choir. That moment is like a sunbeam hitting you. Though as with Since I Left You, the sad chord progression does anchor this thing. So yeah, this does make me really excited for the next album, but as I said before, this is just a single track, and single tracks by the Avalanches don't always excite me that much. So I'm gonna give this one a light 7.5 out of 10, but this really has got me excited for the whole project. Galantis have a new album called Church. So I have a bit of a history with Galantis. Their first album, Pharmacy, released in 2015, was the first album I ever bought. It sort of kicked off my obsession with music. So yeah, I'm extremely grateful that that project exists. And I got extremely excited, of course, with their comeback in 2017, The Aviary. Both of those projects I still think are pretty good, but like, my taste in music has really changed since then, and I've come to realise that some of their music is just a bit generic. Like, they're nearly all in 4/4, 120 BPM, major key, with those typical electronic chord progressions, and some tracks are just so kind of innocent to the point of being a bit sterile and emotionless. But I have to admit, tracks like Forever Tonight, Runaway, Water, True Feeling, Call Me Home, they have got some songs that I still think to this day are good. But this new project being released actually didn't really give me any excitement. I was like, oh, Galantis are back, okay, I'll listen to this thing. And this is definitely my least favourite album by them. Yeah, this kind of electronic pop music, it's just become formulaic. Nothing in this album really surprised me, and it was just a bit lukewarm, you know. Probably the only track that I thought still lived up to the standards of their best work was the track Faith with Mr. Probs and Dolly Parton of all people, God. I found that chopped up drop with the choir samples and pitched around vocals really quite enjoyable. And Dolly Parton sounds pretty good, if extremely auto-tuned. But then, like, the rest of this thing kind of went in one ear and out the other. Tracks like Bones and Steel were just pretty boring. This album's just a bit devoid of the creative elements that you want to hear in an album. It does slightly feel like radio fodder of electronic pop. Actually, the only moment on this album that really surprised me was this one. Like, it seriously made me cringe to hear the F word repeated over and over in a Galantis song in a major key. Just, I don't know what they were thinking. Guess it's not all that innocent after all. But yeah, nothing really left to say on the album as a whole. I'm gonna give this one a 4 out of 10. No, a 4.5. This thing isn't offensive in any way, it's just a bit boring. Okay, I'm just gonna talk quickly about this final one, because this video is getting pretty long. Disclosure have a new EP called Ecstasy, just released a few days ago actually. Now, I haven't really been following Disclosure since Caracal, an album that I didn't really like very much because I just found it a bit sluggish and dull. But I did really enjoy some of their earlier work on their album Settle, and I know that they've been releasing a number of singles and EPs since Caracal, which is supposed to be pretty great, although I haven't really been listening to them, like I said. So I listened to this new EP and I was really quite surprised actually. They've really changed their sound. The signature sounds of their electronic music are still there. But this album was really quite tight and groovy and world music inspired actually. There were quite a number of samples here from like world music singing and stuff. And these tracks were really fun to listen to actually. Super interesting, catchy and danceable, and really different to the stuff they were doing before. Some really infectious tracks like Tondo and Expressing What Matters. Even though I've only listened to this EP once, I'm sure I'm gonna play it again countless times. It really is quite ecstatic, hence the title. The only negative thing I can really say is that some moments on the title track and Get Close were a little bit repetitive and one note, but I think this thing's great. I'm feeling a strong 7.5 on it.
Another hit, what else to do? Think about leaving the house, but my fears aren't letting up.
And that's all today. So I am going to be releasing quite a few new videos soon. I've got a collaboration review with my friend on a Gorillaz album coming out soon. Just got to edit that one actually. And then of course I've also got to finish off my year-end lists. Even though it's March now, it's pretty embarrassing, but you know, it's my channel. So yeah, you'll be seeing my favourite albums of 2019 and my favourite albums of the decade as well pretty soon. I'm just a random kid on the internet, so don't take anything I say objectively, but that's all from me today, so see you next time.